Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good.
Our fear of failure often limits us far more than our actual failure. We don't like fear. Our bodies, our emotions, we're impacted by it deeply. And we start to let those limiting beliefs sink in. They take over. And we feel like we cannot succeed. We cannot win. And guess what? That impacts our ability to learn. We all face fear, and your learners are no different. So how do we help them move to a growth mindset, a place where it's okay to try new things? It's okay to fail. It's okay to continue to show up and be persistent, even in the face of failure. Because it's only when we try new things, when we believe we're capable of new things, that we can learn. I've invited Kim Andrews to the podcast today to talk about the growth mindset. I want us to think about how we help our learners learn. And I think the growth mindset is a great place to start. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Kim Andrews is a certified professional coach, consultant, and learning facilitator with a focus on leadership development and organizational effectiveness. She coaches mission-driven leaders to develop the self-awareness, systems, and skills that enable their teams to thrive and do good work in the world. She believes that organizations can get great results and take great care of their people at the same time. Kim spent 15 years working in public education, first as a teacher and then as a school district and nonprofit leader. Most recently, she was a managing director at Learning Educators, a national nonprofit that partners with school systems to ensure that the students furthest from opportunity succeed in school and in life. Prior to joining Leading Educators, Kim led the design and implementation of new teacher leader roles and professional development in DC public schools. Kim began her career as a sixth grade English teacher in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas as a Teach for America Corps member, where she was a finalist for the Sue Lehman Award for Excellence in Teaching. She graduated with highest honors from Penn State University's Schreier Honors College, earning a BA in Political Science and a BA in Communications. A Northeasterner by birth and at heart, Kim now lives in Columbia, South Carolina, where she misses winter, but enjoys fair weather mornings with a women's running group, is learning to play tennis, currently with more competitiveness than skill, and drives her 3 young kids around in a quote-unquote cool minivan. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Heather. It's good to be here.
I feel like we need to talk about the fact that you miss winter. I did the opposite move of you. I moved from Alabama to Chicago. So I went from warm weather to winter. And I've been here now almost 15 years. And I don't think I'll ever get used to winter. So tell me more about, what do you love about winter?
Well, actually, it's a funny time to talk about that because in South Carolina or in Columbia, we got a light dusting of snow last week, which meant 2 early release days, 2 full snow days, and lots of weather-induced chaos in our southern town. So I wouldn't say I'm missing winter in this moment, but I love the coziness. I love the sweaters. I love the hot drinks. So I'm getting a fair dose of it right now.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair. We had negative weather in January, and I'm not a fan of negative weather. And it's just not a thing that I like. And so I don't relate in this moment to loving
You're
winter.
in a very
I
different
appreciate
realm.
that you do.
You're in a totally different version of winter.
Here is no cozy sweater, cozy enough.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I am so glad that you've joined the show today. I can't wait to hear more from you about developing a growth mindset and how that's going to help our learners learn to learn. Before we get there, I always think it's so special to hear more about your career journey in your own words. So let's start there. Tell us a little more about your journey here.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So I started off as an educator, and I think I will always be an educator, taught middle school. I found my way to education, I think, a little unexpectedly. I studied political science, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with that. And I had a set of really transformative experiences in college working with an amazing nonprofit called the Appalachia Service Project, which does emergency home repair in Central Appalachia. Those experiences really kind of ignited something in me. I knew I wanted to point my career in the direction of social justice, of supporting communities dealing with the kind of complexities of poverty, but I really did not know kind of what shape that would take. And then serendipitously came across Teach for America when I was in college, and something clicked, and I said, this is it. This is my way, my entry point. So yeah, I taught in a really rural town in South Texas, some wonderful sixth graders. And that kind of set me on a path about 15 years in education. So I worked in a variety of education nonprofits. I worked within and around large public school districts all over the country. Really, I think the common thread in all those roles was, how do we help ensure that every kid everywhere has an outstanding and a well-supported teacher every year? It was hard work. It was really meaningful work. I really enjoyed it for a long time. And then I reached this point in my mid-30s or so. It's funny, I've seen a lot of my peers go through a similar transition at a similar time. I knew I needed to make a pivot, and I didn't know what that pivot looked like. And I think it was a confluence of factors. My family was growing. COVID was happening. And I did all the things one does. I hired my own coach. I journaled and meditated and did lots of therapy. And I did all those sort of introspective and reflective things. And I thought for a while, oh, well, I can figure this out while still doing this demanding day job and having these little kids. Until I realized that I was going to have to take a leap before I knew where I was jumping. I had a very supportive husband, and I had a very supportive and encouraging mentor who was the CEO of her own company and said, hey, I'll give you a soft place to land. I can give you some work while you figure it out. I never expected to start my own business. I never self-identified as an entrepreneur, but it grew really organically from there. And now I work with CEOs, executive directors, leadership teams who are feeling stuck in dysfunction. I know that can be like an ugly word. I don't think it has to be. I think it's a really normal experience, and you don't have to stay there. So I love working with teams, helping them find their way back to strong relationships, trust, healthy collaboration, all moving in the same direction. Yeah. And over the course of my career in education, I really got bit by the adult learning bug. And in as much as I started kind of focused on student learning, I really transitioned to think about adult learning in the latter part of my time in education and now. So yeah, coaching, developing people is my jam.
It's hard not to get bit by the adult learning bug.
Especially if you have a growth mindset.
That is true. And what a great transition. I loved hearing your career journey. I think it's so fun to hear how people end up where they are, and life just has this way of working things out. But we are here today to talk about the growth mindset and how we can help our learners learn. And before we jump in, I think it's always important that everyone is on the same page when it comes to some of the key terms that we're going to be using. So what is a growth mindset, and how does that compare to a fixed mindset?
Yes. So I first learned about this work learning how to be a teacher. And it comes from the amazing work of Dr. Carol Dweck, a psychologist who I'm sure lots of your listeners are familiar with. And so in short, it comes down to one's belief about the degree to which their effort makes a difference. So a fixed mindset focuses more on the idea that my intelligence, my abilities are innate. Just the way I'm smart or I'm not, it's just the way I am. And a growth mindset embraces this idea that our effort makes a difference. That when we work hard, when we take on challenges, we can actually change our brains and we can grow and learn and take on and develop new skills. This research, it's been around a long time. It's been applied in lots of different contexts. One of the most powerful parts about it is that having a growth mindset can actually change outcomes for people. It increases motivation. It can make you more likely to succeed. The way you think about your abilities and your ability to grow and learn can affect how much you grow and learn.
Yeah, I love that. And Carol Dweck has a book, which the name is not coming to me at this very moment.
Mindset.
Mindset. There you go. I know it's something obvious. So for anyone, if this is new to you and you're interested in learning more, definitely check out that book. It goes into more detail about the growth mindset. So how have you seen these mindsets show up in learners and impact their ability to learn?
Yeah, I think once you're looking for it, you can see it in so many places. I definitely see it in parenting. One recent experience, I was with a group of senior leaders and we were talking about how to delegate effectively, which is delegation is a really hard thing to do well. It's challenging. There are lots of things that make it challenging. But as I was listening to people reflect on their experiences with delegation, we unearthed some of the beliefs people have about it. And some folks were really honest and they said, look, I'm not good at this. My bosses in the past haven't been good at this. And we unpacked that a little bit. And others were willing to explain their experience that look, this is something I'm okay at. I'm better than I was. And I think I can get better. So when we're able to see something as learnable, it can unlock a lot of possibilities. I saw this too. This is a quick personal example. I brought my 2 older kids to a climbing wall the other week. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, they could both reach the top of this climbing wall. My son didn't while we were there. And he expressed a lot of sort of fixed mindset stuff. I'm not good at climbing. I've not done this before. I don't want to try it. And he tried it. He got a quarter of the way up. And he was really frustrated. And he had a pretty bad time. My daughter, who's a couple years younger, smaller, not as strong, she was able to do it. But it took a lot of tries. And I heard some growth mindset beliefs coming out of her oh, I think I can do this, but I'm really going to have to work at it. I'm going to try the red level next. So she had to try it. She probably tried it a dozen times. And she got there in the end. But she really had to talk herself up to it. And I think that was you see it a lot in kids. And it can be cool to observe their beliefs and help them reframe them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it even in myself. I do CrossFit, but I don't consider myself an athlete and have never been athletic. And so I will say things even in class to other people like, oh, I'm not athletic enough for that. And I've seen that kind of come up for me. And I had someone stop me fairly recently. And she was like, I wish you would stop saying that because you are doing this.
Oh, wow.
You're already doing it. You are an athlete. And so we all hang on sometimes to these labels or beliefs. And well, that's not me. That's not me. And it really can limit us in many ways.
Can I ask, how did that change your experience? When she said that to you, how did that affect you?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
I'm still working on it. I mean, I go into the gym. I do pretty much everything that is programmed. I usually scale it because of weight or gymnastics ability or things like that. But I push my body. I try new things. I take a little bit of a challenge. And so I do give things a try, even when I feel like I'm not going to be successful, but it's still a work in progress to view myself as not athletic in that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
So based on that, I'm sure some of us are probably thinking, okay, is this normal? Like, we just gave examples from work. We gave examples from parenting and watching your children. I gave an example from my own life. Is it normal for us to experience both mindsets?
Totally normal. And I think it's important to remember that our brains have a bias toward negativity. That is deeply wired into us as humans. It's about survival and knowing where the threats are and staying safe. So our brain spends a lot of time and energy trying to keep us as safe as possible. So it's absolutely normal. And in my son's defense, 2 days ago, he insisted on me taking him 20 minutes early to basketball. The gym wasn't even open. It was raining because basketball is new to him and he really wants to get better at basketball. So we played in the parking lot for 20 minutes. By the time I'm your age, Mom, I'm going to hit a full court shot. So yes, we experience both mindsets all the time, sometimes about the same activity. Like some days you go to CrossFit, you may feel more of like strength and persistence and resilience, and other days no. So it's absolutely normal being self-aware about how it's showing up and what the inner kind of dialogue in your brain sounds like is the first step.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we're talking through adult learners. We're talking about people who might have a motivation to learn something or might be told to learn something potentially in the workplace.
Yeah.
So how do we help people? We're learning designers. How do we help people move from a fixed to a growth mindset? Are there certain techniques we should use, or what do you recommend?
Well, I just touched on this. I do think the first part is like raising awareness and normalizing it and just bringing some attention to what a growth mindset is, why it matters, why it can have an impact. You don't have to be an expert. I'm certainly not. You don't have to be a neuroscientist or a psychologist to have kind of a basic grasp of what it is and why it matters. So I would highly recommend people introduce that explicitly into learning experiences. That's the first step. I love talking to people about the malleability of the brain. I am not a neuroscientist. If any are listening, they can fact check me. But our brains are really malleable. I used to have this exercise with my students where they would hold a piece of clay and we'd talk about the word malleable and we'd stretch out the clay and just talk about this idea that we can change our brains. We can carve new neural pathways with new behaviors, new thoughts, but it takes effort because, again, our brain's default is safety. So I think that's a really helpful thing to introduce. It's very empowering for people to, I certainly find it empowering about things like tennis, for example, which I'm learning as a new athletic endeavor. So reminding people that they really can change their brains through effort and attention. Another thing that I think is really important, especially for folks who lead others, lead teams, is for leaders to model this. So for leaders to, in order to create a culture where it's okay for people to, quote unquote, not be good at something or to make mistakes, all these kind of elements of psychological safety, a leader has to be vulnerable and willing to go first there, to talk about their growth edges, to be transparent about kind of their failures or what they're working on. And I think another really tangible thing is to examine the language that we use. And when you're giving somebody feedback or talking to yourself, about something you're working on, or framing for your learners the process and the experience that they're having, to really zero in on effort, on the process. Yes, getting the results and the outcome you want is something to always celebrate, but to be on the lookout for somebody's persistence, to talk to somebody, maybe somebody's not where they want to be in a skill or a new responsibility, and to be able to kind of debrief with them. Hey, I know you're not where you want to be, but look at where you are now compared to where you were. I can see growth. So to kind of really pay attention to the process of learning, help people lift up progress along the way, and to get a little bit more specific in the language you use to talk about learning and growth. And then the last thing I would say, and this I think shows up in kind of training, but also in just day-to-day collaboration, is to help people think about where they're trying to get. If they're at point A, what exactly is point B? What does success look like? How will you know you're there? To get really clear on that, and then to reflect on some experiences you can create for yourself or create for your team that are going to help people get from A to B. It's not going to happen by osmosis. And it's probably not going to happen just by reading a book or sitting in one training, right? We learn experientially. So what are the experiences that are going to help you, your team, your organization get to point B? And just to normalize the messiness along the way.
Learning can definitely be messy. We can appreciate that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about there's a role for the person designing learning and how they're creating activities and providing opportunities for feedback, providing opportunities for reflection, those kinds of things. But there's also opportunity for the facilitator of learning as well. And what is their role? Are they interacting with the learners and helping them kind of process their thoughts and looking at the language that they're using and encouraging, like you're saying, the progress and the effort versus only looking at the outcome. And so I definitely see where those two things, learning designers and facilitators, that they both have opportunity to impact the learner's growth mindset. So thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of takeaways there, both in how we design learning and also how we support our facilitators in delivering that learning.
I will add another, that just made me think of another idea, which is facilitator, along the same lines as leaders modeling for their team, facilitators in the moment, like are doing a lot of adapting, a lot of learning. You may have delivered a particular training dozens of times, but maybe never for that group. So verbalizing through the course of a learning experience, oh, I tried this, I'm going to pivot, here's why, or I learned this from y'all, so I'm going to make a change. I think millions of ways a facilitator can narrate some of that and model it over the course of a learning experience. That can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So I know you're a coach, you're a consultant, you're working with teams all the time. As you said, maybe they're in this kind of state of dysfunction. You're helping them move into something that works. So what breakthrough moments have you seen when using some of these techniques that you've shared?
One that comes to mind, I was working with a leader who was getting a lot of pushback from her team. And she was starting to question her own confidence, her leadership. And we were unpacking some recent tense interactions. And this was sort of a small moment, but I think it unlocked a lot for her. And she said, what do I do when I don't have the answers to a lot of this? I don't know the answers. And I said to her, that's allowed. You're allowed to not have the answers. It seems self-evident in some ways, but I think in other ways, leaders put so much pressure on themselves to be perfect, know everything. So the invitation to not know and to be transparent about that with the people she works with felt new. And I could tell it dissolved a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure she was putting on herself. This is a really successful leader, right? This was somebody who'd led in a lot of challenging context, just bringing some awareness to the impossible bar she'd set for herself and giving her the permission to be vulnerable with her team. Now, look, you've got to know there's a difference between admitting vulnerability and being lost at sea, right? But we talked too about the fact that can be really trust building. It's hard to trust somebody who thinks they have all the answers all of the time because we are all mere mortals. So I think there's a lot of humanity in being open about what we don't know with each other. It can really do that, kind of triggered a set of conversations within the team that I think were ultimately really trust building, because we all have these areas we're learning or insecure or not sure or kind of not yet where we want to be. And so really helping people. Some of my favorite work is helping teams develop a language and a culture around discussing that openly. It can really bring people together and I think help people move forward when things feel really tense and there's a lot of conflict.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kim, do you have any other thoughts, words of advice for people who are just getting started on this kind of journey of thinking about how to help our learners learn, how to lean into this growth mindset? Any final words of advice?
Let's see. I think I would say that I would just emphasize what I've said around the normalcy of this all. We're all growing and learning all the time. And so there's just so much power in naming that. And I would say too, prioritizing. We can't learn everything all of the time. And I think sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially I'm sure a lot of your listeners have a million things they want to get better at or learn. If they're listening to this podcast, clearly they're oriented towards learning. And that can sometimes, I found that to be a little paralyzing. So maybe my last thought is to try and kind of ruthlessly prioritize. Like if you had to just pick one area, one growth edge that would make the biggest difference for your team, for your organization, for you, what would it be? And then what are like 1 or 2 or 3 simple experiences you could have over the next 6 months? Keep it simple. This doesn't have to be like a 20-page growth plan. It doesn't have to involve thousands of dollars and lots of trainings and books. What in your day-to-day could you try, do, watch someone else do and debrief? What day-to-day experiences could you have in your one area of priority? And give it 6 months.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's what we do in learning anyway, right? We try to make it manageable. You can only learn so much at one time.
Yes.
And to keep it simple and focus in on the one thing that you really want to see movement on. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Kim shared a lot of great ideas for helping people move toward a growth mindset. From normalizing that many of us do fluctuate between this fixed and growth state, depending on the task or the experience, and sharing how our brains are capable of changing. I think that's so important that people know. Just because you feel like you haven't been good at something in the past doesn't mean you're not capable of making progress and getting better at that in the future. So I think both of those things are really important. But I also love the practical strategies that she shared around designing learning activities that allow our learners to reflect and celebrate effort, and supporting our facilitators in how they facilitate. If our learners aren't ready to learn, they won't learn. So figuring out how to help them learn is essential. And there's so much value in thinking about how do we get our learners, how do we help them move into a growth mindset as they start this new learning experience. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.